Modern medicine increasingly understands wellness as being more than freedom from illness. Well-being can be defined as a relationship between cultural values, mental health, and the importance of land and place. Many traditional healing practices incorporate not only the knowledge of medicinal plants, but also some of these more intangible aspects of well-being. For example, the body-mind-spirit paradigm is a central healing concept in Indigenous American culture, emphasizing the maintenance of a balanced lifestyle in the physical, mental, contextual, and spiritual realms. Indigenous Australian healing practices, such as that of the Ngungari people from Central Australia, there is emphasis on observation, listening, and touch. Herbal remedies often utilize a whole plant or section as the active ingredient rather than a purified chemical compound. Indigenous knowledges of medicinal plants are deeply tied with the preservation of intergenerational knowledge of country and thus vary between communities based on the land they belong to. While Indigenous health practitioners recognize Western medicine, colonial barriers prevent the preservation of this vital information and recognition of the right to practice and its benefits to both Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities. In this presentation, we'll present some examples of medicinal plants used by Indigenous Americans and Aboriginal peoples and their potential use in mainstream medicine.
Indigenous Americans have had traditional healing practices for centuries that encompasses a range of holistic treatments used by Indigenous healers for acute and chronic conditions. One of the most common medicinal plants used for treating illnesses within Indigenous American tribes is the blue cohosh plant. Blue cohosh is derived from the Berberdicae family. It's a beautiful woodland plant that offers a wide range of purposes. Blue cohosh is native to the most woodlands of the upper Appalachian Mountain Range. Therefore, they can be found in abundance in Missouri. Traditionally, blue cohosh is used by Indigenous American women for pregnancy and menstruation conditions. Specifically, blue cohosh warms and dries the body, which is beneficial to women who experience amenorrhea, which is a lack of menstruation, caused by being cold and damp. This is because when a woman's uterus is congested and cold, she may experience abdominal cramps, delayed menstruation, and lower abdominal pain. Since blue cohosh is characterized as an antispasmodic, uterine stimulant, and relaxant plant, it can ease these symptoms and heal the woman's menstruation cycle by relaxing tension in the female reproductive system. Another way blue cohosh is used as a treatment in Indigenous American people is for childbirth purposes. Blue cohosh induces regular and effective contractions by stimulating oxytocin that opens the cervix and helps with pain. This supports childbirth and stimulates labor. Today, many research studies have been done with blue cohosh that have suggested that it is indeed beneficial to treat spasms and has estrogen-like functions. Blue cohosh is commonly used today to treat bronchitis by herbalists. However, blue cohosh is not proven by the FDA to allow for medication prescription by your doctor. This could be tied to the fact that blue cohosh contains methylcytosine that mimics the effects of nicotine when taken internally. Blue cohosh is often sold as a herbal supplement. It is found to be unsafe to be taken by mouth without proper preparation. The Indigenous American people would take it as a tincture and limit it to no more than 1 to 2 milliliters taken 3 times per day. So overall, blue cohosh is highly used by Indigenous American people and has become widely used in modern Western world. Yet due to the lack of knowledge and misinterpretation and understanding the traditional usage of the herb, it is misused by some areas.
Indigenous plants in Australia have many medicinal uses that Aboriginal people have known about for millennia. An example of one of these plants is Australia's native lemongrass. Lemongrass has been used to relieve headaches, migraines, congestions from the common cold, as well as being made into a salve for aches and pains. The citrus-scented grass would be dried before being made into a tea where the steam could be inhaled. The plant grows in the Northern Territory of Australia within the Aranda people's land. In the early 2000s, researchers from Griffith University isolated the chemical compounds within the plant that provide its medicinal properties, the most important of which seems to be eugenol. Their studies demonstrated that eugenol has antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects at a similar level to modern-day aspirin. Another native plant with long-known medicinal uses that has been taken up by Western scientists since the 1920s is that of the tea tree. The tea tree grows abundantly off the coast of New South Wales in Bundjalung country. Tea tree oil is used as an antiseptic and antimicrobial agent. and the tea tree leaves were crushed to extract the oils. These crushed leaves would then be applied topically to minor wounds and insect bites, or could also be made into tea that was inhaled to soothe the sore throat or help with the common cold.
Generally speaking, Western colonizers of North American and Australian territories believed the indigenous peoples of these countries were primitive, vulnerable nomads. Colonizers arriving in Australia brought about violence and an overall major decline in the well-being of the indigenous populations. Those that were not killed were pushed aside or forced to assimilate to the growing European settlements. Benjamin Rush, a famous early American physician, was particularly fascinated with indigenous North American medicinal practices. However, he fully believed European medicine was superior to the rituals and tradition of the indigenous people. He had a strong contempt for the use of magic in treating diseases and states there cannot be a stronger proof of their ignorance of proper remedies for new and difficult diseases than their having recourse to enchantment, implying that they practiced medicine fully knowing that their medicinal practices were not effective at curing diseases. He was widely dismissive of the ailments they used, and with Rush being a signer of the Declaration of Independence and a civic leader in Philadelphia, his views played a large role in shaping the way other European Americans viewed indigenous North American people and their medicinal practices, such as Lewis and Clark. In 1974, Janice Reed published Sorcerers and Healing Spirits, her doctoral thesis on the Yolngu people, which is an indigenous population in Australia, and their medicinal practices. Her findings, as well as the writings of others such as Margaret Ann Franklin and Isabel White, fostered the beginning of a better understanding of indigenous cultural health practices. Through understanding the practices of indigenous North American and Australian populations, health disparities between the discriminated populations can be lessened, which is still a large problem for indigenous Australians. And more knowledge of medicinal treatments can be exchanged to treat diseases that plague all different kinds of populations.
The use of plant-based medicine has long been overlooked. However, with an increased awareness of the adverse effects associated with synthetic drugs, treatment using plant-based medicine is on the rise. Indigenous Australians use lemongrass for its anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial effects. As for modern-day use, lemongrass might be a great alternative to antifungal and anti-inflammatory topical creams and ointments. A 2017 study from the International Journal of Pharmacy and Chemistry showed that lemongrass oil is a potentially valuable antifungal and anti-inflammatory agent for the prevention and treatment of acute inflammatory skin conditions. Another herb or plant called blue cohosh was originally used by indigenous Americans as an antispasmodic for delayed menstruation and menstrual abdominal cramping, and this plant could have similar uses in modern medicine. Blue cohosh could also be a natural alternative to aspirin in treating similar ailments. A 2009 Yale Medicine study found blue cohosh contains pharmacologically active constituents that could be phytotoxic, cause embryo malformations, and muscle damage. It is also stated that there is very limited extensive research on the plant and potential uses and benefits. That is not to say, however, that there is not a future use of blue cohosh, or any natural medicine for that matter, but it more so indicates that moving forward we need to do more in-depth research to increase our understanding of the safety and efficacy of plant-based medicine as a whole.